We'll start with Manchester United. What do you make of this particular brand of Ruben Amorim shock therapy?
I mean, it's a bold call. The worst United side in history. I guess you'd say the worst since '74 when they were relegated. I think certainly the sort of side of late 20s, early 30s was probably worse than this one. But yeah, it's pretty bad, and yet, it's a side that cost best part of £400 million. But I did sort of found myself when they got the draw at Anfield, when they played well, and they fought hard in the FA Cup game at the Emirates. But there was all this sort of, United are back, Amorim, bit of time in the training field. He's turned the corner. So I think they haven't won for 6 games. I know they won on penalties, but that counts as a draw. And now, really lucky to beat Southampton. Could easily been out of sight before Amad Diallo got going in that game. And I don't know, it just feels like Brighton beat them every time they play them. And in doing so, expose everything that's wrong with United. The Brighton, they're just a very well drilled, very well put together side who have spent money now. They spent quite a bit in the summer, but with young, exciting, motivated players, or players like Danny Welbeck who still have something to give. They're targeting both ends of the market, but they just look a smarter, sharper team. And the way that Matoma just got behind Mazraoui over and over and over again, you sort of think, well, surely every team is just going to do that now. But that's the problem. I think when you have a coach who's got one system that he's so set on, that once a team finds a way around that, then every team is going to start to do that.
Well, I thought that's what jumped out about the first goal in particular, whereby there's now a little bit of tape of Ruben Amorim's side, and we've all seen him on the sidelines screaming, begging his centre halves to step into midfield with their man. Please, this is what I want. And Maguire and others say, I don't really want to, but he's getting through to them. And so in this instance, Matthias de Ligt said, well, I'm meant to go with Welbeck. That's what we're supposed to do. And so he does. And Welbeck is thinking to himself, well, this has all been nicely choreographed. I know you're coming with me and you'll come with me every time. And so De Ligt steps forward with Welbeck, and now there's this massive gap with Mazraoui and Maguire, this Matthias De Ligt shaped gap. And it doesn't seem to occur to Mazraoui that, maybe Welbeck's manipulating the situation and there could be a long ball here and boom. And that's goal one. And as you said, it's just sharper. They're thinking quicker. Whereas the United players are like, I do this now and I do this and this is how we're playing the system properly. But they're not really. It's all very conscious.
Yeah, and was it the second goal or the third goal where Welbeck drops off and nobody does go with him?
Yes.
And you've got this huge gap between the back five and then the next four. Must be a gap of 20 yards. And Welbeck's just sort of standing there. There's no pressure on the ball. The ball's played to him. Welbeck turns and then he slips the pass through to Matoma again. And you sort of think, well, that's what happens if you don't go. But if you do go, you've got to then cover for the space. So I don't know. It feels like, and maybe this is what happens when you ask players to change system mid-season and change it as radically as that, that they just lose their football intelligence, or they lose their confidence in their football intelligence. And so they're scrabbling around so desperately. Where do I have to be in this situation? What's my job here? Well, I've got to stand here. I know that my first job is to stand here. I said, oh God, but there's a huge gap here, and I haven't dealt with that, and I should have gone there. But they're so panicking, they're so worried about filling that gap and not doing the job they were told to do, that it all falls apart. They're just not thinking as footballers.
No, nothing instinctive. All right, as I said, all very conscious. Amorim,
and I think that's probably a long-term process. I think that's the culmination of 10 years of failure and underachievement. That there's every single player who goes to United gets worse, and this is one of the ways in which they get worse. That they just lose that mental sharpness that's necessary.
And not necessarily before they get better. Is the other problem. Amorim, 11 points from 33. It's hard to pinpoint the extent of his culpability here. You'd be inclined to give him a pass, albeit on certain occasions, not least against Newcastle when he picked Casemiro and Eriksen in the centre and midfield, you'd have to say he hasn't helped the situation. I suspect he would argue, well, I've got to try out different things and see what's what and find my way towards a team one way or another. In terms of him going with maybe the worst team in history, I can't think the dressing room will love that. It is kind of a shock factor thing he's gone for there. It's quite early on to be going for that kind of stuff.
I mean, 10 league games in to be pressing that red button. It's, I don't know. I think it's legitimate for him to say, we're not playing particularly well. This is a process we're going through. You can call us whatever you want. If you want to call us the worst team in Manchester United's history, that's you as fans, as journalists, whatever. That is your right. That doesn't concern us because what we're focused on is getting ready for next season. And this is a stage to go through. I think offering up the headline yourself, it's going to, unless he's massively popular in the dressing room, it could get backed up. So, I don't think it's a massive deal, but I would agree with you that it's a dangerous ploy. I think maybe fans won't mind that, and to be honest, like journalists don't mind that. It makes our job easy, but I think fans won't mind it because they sort of feel that they want somebody to be saying what they're saying. But yeah, it's the players he's got to work with all the time. Now he's going to be a better judge of that than we are from the outside. Maybe he has read that dressing room very astutely. Leon Osman was saying last night, wasn't he, that he would hate to hear that, but on the other hand, it probably would fire him up. So, as with so many of these psychological things, we'll find out in 6 months what the right answer was. But he's definitely posing a question to which there will have to be an answer. Yeah,
and he doesn't seem cynical in his public pronouncements, and I suspect this is a kind of trying to jolt the dressing room. But in a Jose Mourinho finishing second with these pile of losers was one of my great achievements kind of a way. I guess it, dampening down of expectations of himself maybe is a nice extra bonus with a comment of that, Look, I kept them.
I mean, yeah, to be fair to Mourinho, that comment is looking truer and truer with every passing hour. It looks like an incredible achievement now.
It does. I scoffed at the time, but now I think, do you know what, Jose? You can absolutely put that on your CV. I guess what the performance yesterday, and particularly against Southampton, I'd never seen Southampton look so good. Highlights is a problem now that quite a few Manchester United managers have faced, which is that against the big teams like Liverpool and Manchester City, where there is a fear factor and there isn't even an expectation on Manchester United fans' behalf that they would go toe-to-toe with these teams. They've just fallen so badly. They can kind of do that, playing a 5-4-1 and sitting in and working hard, and every kind of good moment feels like an injection of belief into the side. Those kind of days, they can produce them and have under several managers now. It's against the lesser teams where there is an onus on them to do something. That's in some ways where they're most exposed.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think that's a tactical issue that they naturally have more of the ball, and that is harder. That they're not slick. They don't have those quick interactions that you should develop over time. And so they struggle to break them down, and then that leads to frustration with the crowd, particularly at home. And the pressure just sort of ramps up. I think there's probably also a psychological element there that, if you're, I don't want to pick on any player individually because I don't think it is an individual's issue. I think I'm almost not really blaming them for this because I think it is natural. But if you're an international who's won 50 caps for your country, you've played in Champions League finals, you've won medals, you don't mind flinging yourself in the way of shots against Liverpool or Arsenal. You sort of think, God, why am I making my sixth block of a half against Brighton? You can see why there'd be it's not that they're not trying, just a sort of sense of I don't expect this from this kind of game. And the problem is that there is an accumulated fatigue that comes from that. And to an extent, the biggest teams, with the way the calendar is at the minute, they have to sort of manage their intensity. And you can't be playing, if you're having to play at 99% to beat Southampton, then you're not going to win anything because you have to be beating Southampton at 80% to recover for when you're putting in the 99% against a Liverpool or an Arsenal.
Yeah. One wider point on this club, this institution. And again, on yesterday, you see the full weight of the club in the tribute to Dennis Law and Alex Ferguson on the pitch, and Brian Kidd and Stephanie and Crerand, and it is such an institution. They're not the worst team, as Ruben Amorim says, in their history. It turns out at this point of the season, they are the 14th worst team in Manchester United history. The 1931 bunch, when they had 9 points this far into the season, take the biscuit as the worst at this stage. But this wider curiosity, really, and it's something Jamie Carragher is trying to popularise in the moment. At the moment, if you take away Busby and Ferguson, and people have known this for a long time, but I suppose it feels like especially relevant now. If you take away Busby and Ferguson, which is the guts of 50 years, if not more. So that, in 150 years, it's still a big chunk of time where things were very good. But if you take away these two remarkable characters, it is quite striking how for a club of this stature, things are not that good. I mean, when Busby arrives in 1945, Manchester United have won 2 league titles. And he racks up 5 and wins the European Cup. And obviously, there's something so storied about the Busby Babes that, the institution, the folklore of it grows worldwide. And then post-Busby, as we know, it's a fallow period until Ferguson wins the league in 92. So for this huge club, unlike Liverpool, who may be, world leaders, certainly in English football, whereby they have success under multiple managers. The boot room and the culture, something about that institution is not as reliant on 2 freakish individuals as Manchester United. I don't know what my conclusion is or what my question is, but it is really, really interesting that you take away these 2 people in Ferguson and Busby, and what is Manchester United, the biggest club in the world?
Yeah. I mean, let's include Ernest Magnell in that as well, the manager who won their first 2. So we've only had 3 league-winning managers, which for the most successful club in the history of the English league is astonishing. And what that suggests is that, I don't know, it's almost like some great mythical beast that only certain chosen heroes can ride. And many warriors will turn up and try and do that, but it's not just about being a good horseman, or you have to be chosen by fate. You look even how they won the 2 titles under Magnell. I mean, I don't really want to relitigate.
Well, Jonathan, who could forget?
Yeah. So, in 1905, and stop me at the moment this becomes familiar. In 1905, Manchester City were building under new ownership, and they were accused of illegal payments. There was a large investigation. They found guilty. They end up having to sell off their entire squad. And there's an auction at the Midland Hotel in Manchester. And Magnell, United would definitely be the lesser partner in the relationship at this point. Magnell goes along to the Midland Hotel before the auction starts and handpicks the 4 players he wants and signs them. Billy Meredith had been banned for a year, maybe just over a year, for his part in illegal payments, which he was always very bitter about and he always denied. And he felt he was being scapegoated because of his work with the PFA and trying to break the maximum wage and get players' rights. And United signed Billy Meredith while City couldn't play him and agreed to pay up his wages. So they get 5 of City's best players, and that's how they win the league in the 1908, their first league title, I think. Then they won the cup in 1909. So it's a slightly freakish way that they win their first title. And Magnell clearly is a very, very gifted manager, and he's a very sharp operator, and he's got an eye to the main chance. So it's these 3 really, really smart managers, and it suggests, I think, there's something about the size of the club that makes it almost ungovernable unless you have these almost supernatural gifts. But I think what's fascinating, I'm sure it's not the word United fans would use, but what's fascinating is that in this era, when you think of money running everything, and you almost think that the Champions League is almost like a game of pass the parcel between the super clubs. Maybe less so now, but certainly when Chelsea won it in 2012, there's almost a sense of Well, if you're sitting in that ring for long enough, if you're one of the super clubs who are in that circle, at some point the music will stop and the pass will be sitting in your lap. And think, with United, surely in the 11 years since Ferguson left, surely at some point they would have just been left sitting there when the music stopped and they would have won it. And they haven't really been close to it. I know they've had, I think there's 2 second place finishes in that time, but neither of them were they really challenging. And to be honest, they're a million miles off now. It's very hard to imagine them challenging in the next 4 or 5 years minimum, but probably longer than that. So, yeah, the way that the Glazers have dismantled this behemoth is genuinely startling. And I wrote a column 3 or 4 weeks ago saying, if you were gonna dismantle United, could you have done it any better? Because if they'd done it quicker, there'd have been street protests and the Glazers would have been forced out. But because it's been incremental, it's the frog in the boiling water. It's sort of every year slightly worse, but only slightly. And every now and again you have a little bit of hope. Yeah, oh yeah, okay, give it a year or two, they'll be fine. And then it just gets worse and worse and worse. They spend the money stupidly. They're now in a bit of PSR trouble to the point where they seem to be considering selling Garnacho and Kobe Mainu, although they deny that. But it's definitely being mooted. So yeah, it's they're a shambles now.
Yeah, it's remarkable. You mentioned Man City. 6-0 win away to Ipswich. Some familiar patterns on the pitch, and De Bruyne, still running well for Foden's second. He won the ball and then ran in behind defence and put a cross in. So maybe there's life in the old dog. I guess what I wanted to get your thoughts on was less on the pitch and more Erling Haaland's new contract, his 9.5-year deal. Which means, unlike Mbappe and Salah, he's unlikely to be running down his contract anytime soon and going to Madrid on a free or elsewhere. Something quite sad to think of 34-year-old Erling Haaland, but that's where he'll be in 9.5 years' time. What is your take on this? Is this just very good business? I saw somebody, a lawyer on Sky Sports, suggesting this is like a new kind of Americanization of ownership in English football. A franchise player in the States, you'll see sign 9-10-year deals routinely across different teams. Why 9.5 years? Why have City gone for this? Why has Haaland gone for this?
I mean, the honest answer is I'm not really sure. I think possibly from Haaland's point of view, he's happy in Manchester. I don't think there's any reason to doubt that. Obviously his father played there. He was born in England. I can see that. He would think, I'm fine here. I think possibly there's a recognition that not that the market's peaked, but that there's not really many places that he could conceivably go who could pay him what he's on now. So conceivably Real Madrid, but even they, I think it felt that the Mbappe deal is slightly different, but they haven't been spending as freely over the last 4 or 5 years as they had done. Is there really anywhere else he could go? Yeah, that's not clear. So I guess there is a certain logic for him and his people. Get this locked in. Then if there is some terrible injury or some terrible loss of form or something, he's safe and secure for the rest of his life. So I assume that's what they get out of it. From City's point of view, and we don't know exactly what clauses are in the contract in terms of relegation or what might happen if City are found guilty of these charges and punished severely. But it might be, from their point of view, lock him in, because we can see some big punishment coming down the track. And what we don't want is not only to find it harder to sign new players, because who would go to a City in the Championship, League One, League Two, or a City who are starting the season with -60, or a City who aren't allowed to play in Europe, or a City who have got this huge hole in their PSR budget because of a massive fine. So tying down the obviously world-class talent you've got probably makes sense from their point of view. It's a bit of giving them a bit of insurance. But fundamentally, I think for a footballer who's any asset whose value can fluctuate as wildly as footballers can. I mean, you look at Mikhail Mudryk, I guess, is a different case now because of the positive test. But even before the test, Mudryk's value had plummeted from the 80 million that Chelsea spent. Now, I don't think Haaland's in the same category. I think he's got far more credit in the bank. I don't think his value would fall like that. But imagine he did have a season where he got 8 goals and the next season he gets 10. What's his value then? I think there's a huge danger from a club's point of view of locking somebody in on a deal that long. But I guess from City's point of view, the circumstances are different. And as you say, maybe this is the new mentality of getting your franchise player, and he's the man on whom you're going to build all your marketing and all your sort of promotion over the next decade.
Yeah, it's interesting if it becomes a trend. And even, he's as close to a sure thing as really any player can be, even in what's kind of he's been. I think if you said to most people, "How's Haaland played this year?" they would say, he's been okay. And obviously, City, the empire has crumbled around them, and he is still just one goal behind Mo Salah in the top of the Premier League charts, 17 to Salah's 18. So even his kind of humdrum fine is going to be a 20, 25 goal a season haul. Salah has 13 assists to his 1, worth stating, but still. You should really let Arsenal fans know when you're planning on going to certain games. You have been present, the Wilson kiss of death, for 3 of their most damaging draws. Arsenal's season is not a tale of losses. They've lost just 2 league games this season. The 8 draws have killed them. And this one, in light of the Liverpool late win away to Brentford, being 2-0 up, this one felt especially deathly. I think this is the one most people casually said, okay, league done.
Yeah, I think that's true. And not just because the gap's up to 6 points, but back up to 6 points. If Arsenal and Liverpool have both won their last 2 games, you'd say, okay, Liverpool have taken 2 steps closer to the end of the season and thus to the title. But I think this felt like a bigger shift than that. Because Liverpool had slightly opened the door, the fact the gap was down to 4 points after the midweek games. And then, the fact that game at Brentford, Liverpool's game at Brentford, was 0-0 at 90 minutes. And if you're an Arsenal fan, you must have been sitting there thinking, we could close within 2 here. All we got to do is beat Villa at home to. Oh no, Darwin Nunez has scored. Okay, well, at least 4 is not too bad. And then, of course, you go 2-0 up, and you're sort of thinking, well, yeah, it's the 4 point gap, that's fine. Totally routine win, it appeared at that point. Villa were offering almost nothing. And one of the things I've been saying over the last couple of years is that if Arsenal are going to win the title, they need some routine wins. They can't be going to the emotional well and having to really drain the bottom of that every week. And then just from nowhere, 2 bits of terrible defending. Well, 3 bits of terrible defending because Villa hit the post as well in the space of 8 minutes. And the game's level. And although Arsenal then had pressure, and they actually came very close to getting a winner. That Marino had the shot that hit Havertz's hand and went in, had the shot that hit the post. You had the Trossard chance 5 minutes into injury time, which I think actually probably was just offside, although we don't know that. But there was it was almost a sense of, well, they're never going to score now because this title is just gone. They just, for whatever reason this season, they just don't have that edge. They don't have the fates behind them. And so, I think the mood on Saturday night at the Emirates was pretty down. A sort of sense of, it's gone now.
Before you go, you were in your piece in The Observer musing on Nottingham Forest and this extraordinary season. They beat Southampton 3-2 at the weekend. Really, that was one of those results actually which didn't reflect the flow of the game. It should have been 4-1. VAR saved Ramsdale's blushes and Southampton got another late goal to make it 3-2. But they were really good value for 3-2. You made a couple of interesting points, and they are, in with a real shade of Champions League football. Newcastle and Chelsea, if we take it that City are now back and we'll put something together enough to sustain Champions League football at least, Newcastle and Chelsea are the 2 who are chasing them down. Chelsea win tonight. There's a 4 point gap, 5 points to Newcastle, who lost unexpectedly to Bournemouth. So on Forest, you point out their XG is the 15th best in the league, and here they are in 3rd level with Arsenal on points. So they've outscored their XG by 3.8. But you make the point that their simplicity, I think anyone who's watched Forest play 2 or 3 games has, a fair sense of how they're going about their business. But you say their simplicity is deceptive. It looks easy because it's all so well planned. Players who fit together in a cohesive system, something that, it has to be said, never seemed plausible amid the trolley dash that followed promotion. They've been fortunate with injuries. Only 3 sides have had fewer lost days this season. But Forest are a triumph of Nuno's clarity of vision. And that is really true. I mean, when they were buying any player who seemed to cross the road in front of them, you thought, well, this thing is just destined to blow up in their faces. But, you go through the team and defensively so solid, and then you have the running of Hudson-Odoi and Elanga, that pace. You have Wood, who's having a season of seasons and a kind of perfect target man, especially for that kind of counter-attacking. And Gibbs White is linking it all together, and that kind of guile, which adds a little sprinkle onto a team. And they all know what they're doing, and it's a nightmare to play against. And here they are. So your thoughts on Forest, down to Nuno's clarity of vision, you say?
Yeah, largely. I mean, and also players playing really well at the same time. So I think the comparison with Leicester in 2015-16 is worth making. And they have 44 points from 22 games, which, as Leicester did that season, the difference is that Leicester at that point, I think, were level with Arsenal and a point ahead of City. And then they developed, I think it was a 5-point gap they got within 2 games as they went away to City and won. You may remember that 3-1.
Yeah.
When Mahrez was sensational that day. And that was, I think, certainly it was the game where I suddenly thought, hang on, they might actually do this. And then they beat Liverpool 2-0. And although they lost the next game to Arsenal, they never lost the lead. But the difference obviously between that season and this season is that Liverpool are 6 points clear with a game in hand. That Liverpool are playing better this season than any team did in 15-16. But I think it's a similar season in some ways, in that a lot of the top clubs have had slightly off seasons, have underperformed slightly. One of the, and it's very hard to distinguish cause and effect here, but one of the other factors is that there feels like quite a big and quite a strong middle class. So the likes of Bournemouth, Brighton, Brentford, and Bournemouth absolutely brilliant on Saturday, particularly given how many injuries they had. I mean, if you look at their bench, I think that the total number of appearances by players on the bench was 39, 30 of them from Mark Travers. So, I mean, I understand Newcastle saying, "Oh, it was a game too far for us. We're weary." They've had the Carabao Cup semi-final. That's a reasonable enough point to make. But also look at Bournemouth. Come on, it's not that they're in peak freshness. So, is that because the very elite is not performing to the same level, or is it because that middle class is wealthy enough, strong enough, well run enough to challenge? Probably a bit of both. So that similarity of 15-16 is there, and I think, like Leicester in 15-16, this Forest, it's a combination of the right manager at the right time, a manager who's got a very clear idea what he wants to do, probably half a dozen players having the season of their lives so far, and I think the way Forest have gone about this, they got promoted almost, I don't want to say by chance, like that diminishes what they did and what Steve Cooper had done there, but they weren't expecting to be promoted, and they had a lot of loan players on that side, so they almost had to go out and sign a dozen players just to fill up the squad.
Yeah.
And okay, they signed 2 dozen players, but there was a certain logic in, let's just go out and get a load of players who might be good enough for this level, and then we'll work out the details later. I'm almost saying, you know what, we'll take the 4-point deduction because our best chance of staying up is to overfill the squad, take the fine, but assume we'll have, we'll gain enough points from the players we've got that what we lose on the points deduction will be less than that. And then I think they've refined that as they've gone along. And I mean, there is nothing complicated about the way they're playing this season. It's a pretty basic 4-2-3-1. 2 players sitting deep in midfield. I mean, Elliot Anderson's been superb driving forward from that position. Gibbs White with great energy and imagination, linking everything together. The pace and directness of Elanga and Hudson-Odoi, the 2 wingers. Chris Wood, who nobody would have thought. I mean, you'd have thought it was Awani would have been playing that role, but the fact they've got 2 players who fit the role perfectly, you only need one of them to be in great form to be incredibly dangerous. Matt Sells is, they had loads of problems with keepers last season. Matt Sells had a stunning season. I think he's second in shots saved ratio, which is one of the reasons they're outperforming what was already a very good goals against. I think have they got the lowest goals against, maybe the second lowest goals against, but they're outperforming that because of Sells. So yeah, everything's going right, and I think you've got to give a lot of credit to Nuno for the environment he's created. And you can see those players are playing with confidence now, and therefore getting absolutely the maximum out of themselves.
Yeah, so we'll see how long it continues. Very last one, Ange Postecoglou conceded his switch to 3 at the back. Maybe didn't help things at Goodison on the weekend. He obviously is cutting an increasingly frustrated, downtrodden figure in post-match interviews. It was kind of striking that the Spurs fans decided to go with "we want Levy out" as opposed to directing all their ire at him, although he's getting some, obviously. 6 teenagers on the bench, it feels a little bit weak to cite the injury crisis, but it is a real injury crisis, albeit with very good players still on the pitch. Is he going to see this one out? Does when Daniel Levy hears the abuse directed at him, does that make him more inclined to actually make a change to distract, or maybe it has no tangible effect whatsoever? Are you out on Ange? I would keep him there. I would let him get through this period and see what's what when he has more of a hand to play. But it's hard to defend him totally, I concede.
I'd be amazed if he's still there at the start of next season.
Hey.
I think the feeling at the club is they would like him to see out this season and see where they are then. I think there's a belated recognition that the squad is... I mean, you talk about the 16 inches on the bench. You also had Bergvall and Archie Gray on the pitch.
Yeah.
Who are both teenagers who are... And, Kinski, the keeper's only 21. So they've been a little bit unlucky with injuries, but equally the way they've constructed the squad has left them vulnerable to that. So if you go into a season with 3 frontline centre-backs plus Ben Davies, the chances of you getting through it without a period where at least 2 of your centre-backs are injured at the same time is quite low. As it happens, 3 of them have been injured at the same time. And Dragic every week seems to get another knock, and he's sort of like the Black Knight now with the bits hanging off him, just sort of soldiering on. I think they've maybe, unfortunate is the wrong word, but the complete collapse of Son's form, I don't think you could foresee that.
The chance he missed at 1-0 down, you could see Ange on the touchline afterwards. It was, come on.
And again, maybe if Richarlison hadn't had the injury, he would have started rather than Son, and they looked better after he came on. But he hasn't been fit for most of the season, so I understand why you wouldn't necessarily rely on him. The fact that Solanke misses this game, seemingly because he injured himself in the gym. There are lots of little bits of bad luck, but I also think you can set up a squad in a way that at least mitigates the effect of that. And Spurs, it was a risky squad they went to the season with, and they're paying the price for that now.
Okay, we'll see where they go. That was great, Jonathan Wilson. Pleasure. Thanks again.
Cheers. Thank you very much.